fire crackled softly, its light flickering against the dense darkness of the forest. My friends and I had gathered around it, each of us huddled close against the chill of the night. We'd been swapping ghost stories for hours, our voices mingling with the sounds of the night, the rustling leaves, the distant call of an owl. When it was my turn, I hesitated. There was a story I had never shared, one that had haunted me for years. As I took a deep breath, I began. Years ago, I went camping in a remote part of northern Michigan. The forest was vast, untouched, and enveloped in a perpetual twilight. My family and I had set up camp far from the nearest town, surrounded by towering pines that seemed to reach into the heavens. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to take a walk. The moonlight barely pierced the dense canopy, casting ghostly patterns on the forest floor. I followed a narrow trail that seemed to lead deeper into the woods. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig beneath my feet. As I wandered, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A voice. It was faint at first, a distant cry for help. The voice was desperate, frayed with fear. I couldn't make out the words, but it was clear someone was in trouble. I quickened my pace, driven by a mixture of concern and curiosity. The voice grew louder, more insistent, pleading for help. It was coming from somewhere nearby. My heart pounded in my chest as I followed the sound, weaving through the trees and the thick underbrush. The forest seemed to close in around me, the shadows growing deeper. The voice continued to call, its tone now unmistakable, a cry for salvation. I pushed through the tangled foliage, driven by an urgency I couldn't explain. The whispers of the wind seemed to join in, adding an eerie accompaniment to the voice's desperate pleas. Then I saw it, a small, decrepit cabin hidden among the trees. The whispers grew frantic, mingling with the cries for help. The door was ajar, and as I approached, the darkness inside seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. I hesitated for a moment, my instincts screaming at me to turn back, but the voice continued its pleading. I stepped inside, the door creaking ominously behind me. The cabin was dimly lit by the faint moonlight that filtered through broken windows. The interior was filled with an oppressive silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. I moved cautiously through the cabin, my eyes scanning the shadows. The voice was now a low murmur, almost a whisper. I followed the sound to a small room in the back. There, in the dim light, I saw an old mirror hanging on the wall, its surface cracked and covered in dust. As I approached, the voice seemed to emanate from the mirror itself. I peered into it, my breath fogging the glass. In the reflection, I saw a figure standing behind me. It was a dark, indistinct shape with glowing eyes. The figure reached out towards me, its eyes filled with a chilling hunger. I spun around, but the room was empty. When I turned back to the mirror, the figure was gone. The whispers had ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. My heart raced as I backed away, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. I turned and fled from the cabin, my mind reeling. The forest was still and quiet, the voice gone. I raced back to our campsite, my breaths coming in ragged gasps. When I reached the safety of the firelight, I was breathless and shaken. I never told anyone about the voice or the figure in the mirror. As I concluded my story, I noticed the unease in my friends' faces. The firelight flickered, casting long, distorted shadows on the trees. The forest around us seemed to grow darker, the sounds of the night more pronounced. Then I heard it, the voice. It was faint at first, but unmistakable. A a distant cry for help drifting through the trees. My heart froze as the voice grew louder, more desperate. My friends' faces reflected the same terror I felt, their eyes darting to the dark forest beyond the fire's glow. The cries grew more frantic, mingling with the whispers of the wind. It felt so real, so immediate. The voice seemed to be calling us, pleading for assistance. The forest seemed to press closer, the shadows thickening. As the darkness closed in, I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder, and when I looked around, no one was there. The voice was now an urgent roar in my ears, a cacophony of desperate pleas. The shadows seemed to reach out, and I could feel the chill of something ancient and malevolent drawing near. The firelight flickered wildly, the shadows stretching long and thin. The whispers returned, joining the cries for help. It felt like they were closing in, wrapping around us like a suffocating shroud. Panic surged through me, and I could see my friends' faces reflecting the same terror I felt. The forest consumed the light, and as the cries for help grew louder, the darkness seemed to pull us in. The last thing I heard was the voice, no longer distant, but right next to me, whispering in my ear. And as you sit by the fire, just know that it is me calling for your name from the darkness. Don't follow it. If you do, I'll be waiting for you in the shadows, ready to pull you into a story you'll never escape.